why a lot of people are upset.
What was the turning point in the 70s? Was there something in politics happening at that time, or was it just, as you said, corporate greed? The corporations have said enough is enough, we want more.
Yeah, it was a period of growth. And what happened sort of in terms of economic theory was that during the period of growth, you would take off sort of taxes from sort of the extra and you would save it, because we know that capitalism has sort of these swings involved in it, so that, you know, if you don't want to go back down to the 30s level where people are desperate, so you need to take off a little bit at the top so that if it's going to swing down again, you have money to put back in, maybe an infrastructure program where you've got people building and putting money back into the economy. So when the governments were saying, let's take that little off the top and set aside a nest egg, that's when they said, the corporation said, no, the boom's going to last forever, we don't want to do that. And a lot of the government, because they, you know, were getting money from the corporations to pay for, you know, their campaigns or for various private projects, they started to follow that agenda. And then the next time we had a crisis down in the 80s, all of a sudden there wasn't the nest egg anymore, and we started to hear about the welfare cheats, who were the ones who were causing the problems in our society, and the growing deficits, and how we couldn't afford healthcare and education. So we really lost, that's the point when we really saw the price that we paid for not having sort of taken away our little rainy day fund. But by then the corporations were paying close to 0% taxes in some of the countries. Other countries didn't do that, and they didn't have those swings of depression and recession and jobless recovery and things like that.
And it really started flowing in the 80s with Reagan, when Reagan came into power.
And started deregulating.
Mulroney in Canada, in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Up until 1985, 86, when Mulroney was in power, our Canadian banks had to have a minimum of a 10% reserve. Okay, so what that means is, for every dollar they lend out, for every dollar they lend out, they need to have 10 cents in the bank to cover that withdrawal, or that deposit. And Mulroney came in, and now Canadian banks need to have no reserve. So for every dollar they lend out, they do not have to have a dollar in deposit. Okay, it's just not there. Literally speaking, if everybody went down to the Royal Bank today in Canada and withdrew all their money, the Royal Bank would crash. There's not enough money in the bank to pay for all those deposits.
And that's what happened in Argentina.
That's exactly what happened. A lot of countries, and they collapsed. In the 80s, a gentleman by the name of Moncton from the University of Chicago, he's a world-renowned economist. He came in, he had a lot of influence in a lot of conservative thinkers of the 80s and moving into the 90s and even today. You look at the Tea Party, and this very Milton Friedman is stamped all over it. He advocated basically no government involvement in business, complete laissez-faire capitalism, and no regulation, none, and the markets will take care of themselves. That's what we've essentially been living with for the past 15 to 25 years. It's not working. So what we're saying as an Occupy movement is, there's a better way. Let's find it. We don't have all the answers as the movement. We're just citizens, but we're saying there's a problem. What business and government's been doing for the past 25 or more years is not working. We need to work together to find a better way. You know, back to the CEOs and the top 1%. Some other facts for you here. The top 100 CEOs in Canada had a 13% year-over-year increase in their incomes in the past 2 years. That is an average in Canada for those top 100 CEOs of $6 million a year. The average Canadian family is making $38,500, which is a decrease of almost $1,000. So the poor are getting poorer, the rich are getting richer. And it's going to keep going on that way. We live in a world of finite resources, but the economic model we're in right now is infinite growth. Those two things can't exist. You cannot have infinite growth with finite resources. So we're saying enough is enough. Time to make a change.
That do have the higher tax rates on corporations and on individuals have a very steady growth of employment and economic prosperity. They don't have the highs, but they also don't have the lows. So if you look at places like Iceland, or look at places like Ireland, where they had some of the explosive growth when they had all of the deregulation, they've also had horrific crashes, particularly because they took a lot of their development offshore. You know, they're got sort of sweatshops making products. They're just putting out their natural resources. They're not doing secondary manufacturing. But the countries in the Scandinavian group, they're doing everything in-house. So they're hewing the wood, they're developing it, they're turning it into products that have sort of high sort of quality and value within their communities. They're taking care of their environmental issues. They're paying high wages so that those people are then putting money back. When you have high wages.
IKEA, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when you look at how the people at IKEA, they're doing great. Those are happy workers. They're productive. They're paid well. They spend their money back in their communities. New jobs are created. New entrepreneurs are created. It really is sort of like a kind of cycle of growth once you start having that move through the economy.
I used to work for a company here locally that did a lot of business in Sweden, and I spent a lot of time in Sweden. And the Professor's right, they pay high taxes. It cost me $18 for a beer. They don't complain about it because they've got everything taken care of. Their economy runs well, their government runs well, and the citizens are cared for and respected.
Yeah, but do we have enough, do we not pay enough taxes? Maybe it's government mismanagement, I hear people say.
Absolutely, there's a lot of waste, and there's areas that can be cut, but, and I'm not advocating big government necessarily, there's other solutions to this as well. You mentioned Iceland. Iceland's a prime example of this. Iceland was sort of the beginning of the end of this whole system, in that in Iceland, what happened was it was primarily a country of fishermen. There's only 300,000 people there. Their prime industry was fishing. And basically one day, someone decided, they looked at Wall Street and said, well, we can do that. And so everybody became investment bankers. And they started buying and selling all these things at incredible prices. They'd make an offer and someone would accept it because they've already offered over what they probably wanted. And they started trading the stuff amongst them. The banks, the investment banks in Iceland started trading the assets amongst them, inflating the prices over and over again. And then when it crashed horribly. It brought the country to its knees. The country's bankrupt. Ireland's going that way. Greece is, I mean, we know what's going on in Greece in the news right now. Greece is on its way. Italy, Spain, Portugal, all of their sovereign debt is very close to being bankrupt. Those countries are close to being bankrupt. If they go, I don't want to, be one of those lunatic fringe guys saying the end of the world.
I think you left out a country.
Well, if those ones go, I'll tell you the next one will be France and Japan, and if they go, it's going to be the U.S. And they're all dominoes. The world, globalization, the world is interconnected. So what happens in Greece matters in Moncton. Okay, it's all interconnected, and it's fundamentally flawed. It cannot continue the way it is. So, like I say, the Occupy movement is there to say we need a better way. There's all kinds of other issues in this Occupy movement. There's, it's sort of like a magnet to causes right now, and that's fine. And as a movement, we're accepting of all those different causes. But for myself, the root cause is this corporate greed and our banking system and the way we produce money in this country. We haven't talked about that yet at all. But that's another issue.